Okay, we are joined by our sports producer, Sandile Mkunu, to speak about the breaking news of football legend Pele. Sandile, really devastating news, but we do know that, of course, he had not been well for some time. But let's speak about his legacy.
Good evening, Heidi, to you and the viewer at home. Well, his legacy is that of a great player. He's arguably the greatest player to ever have played the game, depending whichever way you look at it, because some would say maybe it's Lionel Messi and others will argue that it's Cristiano Ronaldo. But if you look at the stats, he won 3 World Cups, as we have heard when Hloni was doing that obituary of Pele. It's a sad day, not only for football, but in Brazil as well. We know that legends such as Neymar and all the other players, Ronaldo, the original Nazario, they are all sad, but he is one of the best players. He's the only player to have won the World Cup from the days when it was still the Julius Rimet Trophy. He has won it 3 times. And his story, by the way, he saw his father crying. And when his father was crying, he was crying because Brazil had lost a World Cup. So now he told his father that, you know what, don't worry, one of the days I would win this competition for Brazil. And guess what? At the age of 17, Heidi, he won the World Cup back in 1958 in Sweden. The rest is history. He has never played in Europe, but he didn't need to go and play in Europe, playing for his beloved club, Santos, and he won everything before him in terms of the World Cup. And he had 12 goals. Yes, Lionel Messi overtook him because he has 13 goals now, having played 5 World Cups. So he's a legend, Pele Nascimento.
Yes, and what a beautiful part of the story you said, where his father cried and he told his father, don't worry, I will win the World Cup. And he won 3 times, in 1958, 1962 and in 1970. We also know that he was voted as FIFA Player of the Century in 2000, and that of course speaks to the great soccer player that he was.
Yes, indeed, absolutely. And all this is happening when, we recently lost Maradona. Diego Maradona was one hell of a player as well during his playing days. And when he passed on, a lot was said, maybe in terms of the Albiceleste Argentina, whether they were going to ever win a World Cup, especially Messi as one of the greatest players. They won the World Cup. There's also a notion now, I was talking to my colleague who said maybe Brazil are going to win the World Cup soon after that because they lost, they haven't won a World Cup since 2002. So now maybe Brazil will win the World Cup, the next World Cup in 2026 in honor of Pele. Maybe this is going to motivate them. Whether it is going to happen or not, only time will tell. But they have great players, the current generation, the likes of Rodrigo, the likes of Neymar, and all those top players that they are still playing for Brazil. In 1970, Pele had a lot of players who helped him win the World Cup. The likes of Jairzinho, the likes of Carlos Alberto, Jessin, you name them all, Carincha, all those top players that Brazil had at their disposal back then. So even now, I'm still sure that Brazil will win the World Cup in the near future, as we can see on our screens. Pele and Diego Maradona, arguably 2 of the greatest players to ever play the beautiful game of football.
I actually have goosebumps watching him on screen at the moment and watching the legend that he really was. And I know you mentioned it briefly, Sandile, but you spoke about the amount of goals that he scored. Maybe just remind us, and if you know the number of games that he actually played. I mean, we're speaking about a legend. We're speaking about somebody who future players could possibly be looking up to. And the fact that you mentioned that, this could possibly motivate Brazil to work even harder, given the devastation that they felt in the recent World Cup.
Well, Heidi, Neymar recently equaled his goal-scoring record in terms of Brazil, the Seleção, the national team. He scored his 77th goal, one might recall, during Croatia game when Brazil were knocked out, surprisingly so, at the recent World Cup in Qatar. But it was Neymar's 77th strike. So he is the all-time leading goal scorer by the time he passed on with Neymar now. But Neymar, remember, he has played more games than Pele. Pele did that in under 100 games. So you can see that his strike rate was second to none in terms of scoring goals for Brazil. So he is the all-time leading goal scorer for Brazil, jointly with Neymar, who is playing for Paris Saint-Germain at the current moment in the French Ligue 1.
Wow, truly a legend. May his soul truly rest in peace. Thank you so much for those insights and giving us some perspective into who Pele was. That is Sandile Mkunu, who is our sports producer here at ENCA.